So, there was a major disaster that has occurred in DC. A plane flying from Wichita, Kansas to DC made physical contact with an army helicopter colliding in midair, and the destruction that came from it looked pretty much instantaneous, and there are zero survivors, which includes 60 passengers, 4 crew members aboard the plane, and 3 individuals who were in the helicopter are all dead. There's a lot to talk about here. This is a tragedy, and it is a tragedy that I feel a strong connection to because I am from Wichita, Kansas. I have spent my entire life here. And yeah, scary. The loved ones in my life who recently, took a flight to and from, the same airport that this flight departed from, including very recently, thinking about, all the theoretical plans we've tossed around over the last year. Is there a scenario where I was on this flight? Is this a scenario where a loved one of mine was on this flight? Yeah, definitely. And actually, as a matter of fact, without knowing the names of every victim yet, maybe I do know someone who is involved here. I've not heard a word from anyone from any of my social circles, my family, my friends, that, so someone in my personal life was on this flight. 67 dead is a big number, so it's scary. Even should I be lucky and not know anyone who died in this disaster, there are a lot of people all around me who did know someone who was on the flight. This is probably going to be a situation where most people in Wichita know someone who knows someone that was on this. Some degree of separation, but a small degree of separation. So let's dive into it. Let's dive into it and talk about why this happened. Talk about Trump's disgusting response, of course. And I think I maybe have a plead for people afterwards. Let's jump into it. So, DC plane crash live updates. Bit of a summary here. American Eagle Flight 5342 from Wichita, Kansas, carrying 60 passengers and 4 crew members, collided midair with an Army helicopter carrying 3 people near Reagan Washington National Airport last night. 2 aircraft crashed into the Potomac River, where a rescue operation has become a major recovery effort, with dozens of bodies pulled from the frigid waters so far. President Trump said today there are no survivors. Trump and his cabinet members also used the White House press briefing on the crash as an opportunity to attack DEI initiatives. If it weren't for the freezing waters, those bodies would still be warm, and he's blaming diversity. Bodies are still being pulled from the river. It's very likely that many loved ones have not been informed by officials yet that they lost a loved one in this disaster. A lot of fear, a lot of confusion, a lot of grief, and he took his press briefing as an opportunity to attack DEI initiatives, something for which there's, of course, much like anything else, no evidence to suggest that it was at fault. What there is evidence to suggest is that Donald Trump and, of course, Elon Musk and their policies in only their first 10 days have done for our air traffic industry. We'll be getting into that nitty-gritty here in a second. A preliminary FAA report on the crash says that staffing at the Reagan Washington National Airport Air Traffic Control Tower last night was not normal, a source told NBC News. American figure skaters, coaches, and family members who had been at a camp in Wichita were among those aboard the passenger jet, according to U.S. Figure Skating. There was a big event here in Wichita where American figure skaters were performing, basically trying out for Team USA representation at the World Championships. Many of them, it seems, were on this flight. But yeah, prominent if you follow figure skating, which I know is a little bit more of a niche interest, but still, it's a sport, right? Professional athletes in town doing their thing, vying for a spot on Team USA. Right? And they did their thing, and some of them traveled from Wichita to DC, but never quite touched down. Not with their lives, anyway. So, let's get into some details. This is, of course, still an active story. Bodies are still being recovered. Reactions are still coming in. Responses to awful like this reactions are coming in. Mayor Lily Wu of Wichita, of course, had her own response. There's a prayer vigil that occurred earlier today. This is my mayor. This is my representative, Ron Estes, to her right. Again, this is just why it's kind of eerie to me. You know, this is my backyard, so to speak. Even though it happened in DC, you know, this is a story that's very close to us. This is the first U.S. commercial plane crash since 2009. You've heard the adage that flying is the safest way to travel. That's very true. Look at any statistic per capita, yeah, flying in a plane is very, very safe. A large reason for that is because so much work and effort and people and technology, labor and technology, I should say, goes into ensuring it is safe. Because when a car accident happens, right, it's usually non lethal and it's usually limited to a small number of individuals, right, within the single digits. That's how most car accidents, most car crashes occur. Of course, they're infinitely more common because there's a lot more cars on the roads than planes in the sky. But at the end of the day, you know, that is the expectation for car crashes, for car collisions. When a plane experiences a crash, when something wrong happens aboard a flight, that is a much more potentially deadly situation for a large number of people because, of course, planes are small capsules consisting of a large number of people in a small space who do not have any real defensive mechanisms themselves. They are at the whim of gravity and the technology that surrounds them, the skill of the pilots, the knowledge and communication and skills of air traffic control. So if something goes wrong, a lot more people are at risk. Right there it is. As we see in this extremely low quality video, but the quality doesn't matter because, I mean, look at that, right? You see a light, you see that light explode, and then you see various fragments of light fall to the earth. Like there's nothing to be done about that after the collision has occurred. I digress a little bit, but all that goes to show just why we put so much emphasis as a country, as a government, into flight safety. Because when something goes wrong, the potential for high-level disaster is there. But the current administration, that has only been in power for 10 days, disagrees. And they have undergone a number of changes to weaken our overall flight safety in this country. And we are already experiencing a negative consequence of their actions. DCA staffing at the tower, you know, the tower, of course, being what is responsible for the organization of all the different vehicles going on in the surrounding area. Staffing was not normal there during the crash. This is according to a preliminary FAA report. Staffing was not normal for this level of traffic. Traffic was particularly high, and there was only one controller designated for both helicopters and airplanes rather than one apiece. FAA guidelines do allow for this position to be combined, permitting one controller to control both. It is within guidelines, however, it was still an understaffed situation. Now, is this consistent with some things we have seen this administration do in regards to air traffic? Yes. Now, we will not know for sure definitively for a long time what exactly went wrong here. However, this outcome is not necessarily surprising given what we have seen the current administration do to aviation safety. This article was written over a week ago. Trump guts key aviation safety committee, fires heads of TSA and the Coast Guard. The committee will technically continue to exist, but it won't have any members to carry out the work of examining safety issues at airlines and airports. Trump moved quickly to remake the Department of Homeland Security Tuesday, firing the heads of the Transportation Security Administration and Coast Guard before their terms are up, and eliminated all the members of a key aviation security advisory group. Members of this committee received a memo Tuesday saying that the department is eliminating the membership of all advisory committees as part of a commitment to eliminating the misuse of resources and ensuring that DHS activities prioritize our national security. This committee was mandated by Congress after the 1988 Pan Am 103 bombing over Lockerbie, Scotland. It will technically continue to exist, but it won't have any members to carry out the work of examining safety issues at airlines and airports. Before Tuesday, the group included representatives of all the key groups in the industry, including the airlines and major unions, as well as members of a group associated with the victims of the Pan Am 103 bombing. The vast majority of the group's recommendations were adopted over the years. It was not immediately clear how many other committees were effectively eliminated Tuesday or whether other departments will take similar actions. We do also know that the previous FAA administrator recently stepped down under pressure by Elon Musk. Again, very, very recently. Yeah, as we see here, the FAA administrator quit on January 20th after Elon Musk told him to resign. He had only been in the role for a year, but the SpaceX chief accused him of harassment. At the time of the crash, it seems like there was no acting FAA administrator even. Sean Duffy was asked that question while he was at the podium for a press conference. Sean Duffy is the very, very newly confirmed Secretary of Transportation. He walked away after being asked that question by a reporter whether or not there was an acting FAA administrator at the time of the disaster.
Is there an acting FAA director?
I mean, no one else is really talking in that room. A reporter asks, is there an acting FAA director? And he doesn't seem to even acknowledge the reporter's existence. Yeah, this is also consistent, of course, with all of Trump's hiring freezes and whatnot. Of course, we won't know for a long time if any of Donald Trump's executive orders directly caused the short staffing, but it's very possible, and it is completely consistent with the way they have handled all transportation, flight safety things in their very short tenure in office so far. Trump's response is absolutely despicable. When I hear this, I can't help but be infuriated at anyone and everyone who thinks that this guy has any ounce of empathy or intelligence or, competency whatsoever.
I signed something last week that was an executive order, very powerful, on restoring the highest standards of air traffic controllers and others, by the way.
By high standards, he means getting rid of DEI initiatives, i.e. less diverse hiring, i.e. more, just white men in office, and not in office, but in the positions.
The FAA's diversity push includes focus on hiring people with severe intellectual and psychiatric disabilities.
Not every FAA position is a high-stress life or death position, and not every intellectual disability is one that would prevent a person from adequately operating that role. Awesome how he's using this press briefing as bodies are still being pulled out of the Potomac to cover his ass. Keep in mind, by the way, that as we had just mentioned, there was only one operator charged with managing both airplanes and helicopters during the crash. They were short-staffed at the time of the crash. And he's out here saying that a diversity initiative that would theoretically only enhance hiring is at fault here. There's absolutely no evidence whatsoever to suggest a mentally handicapped air traffic controller was given the reins of both planes and helicopters at the time of the crash, but that's his response, placing the blame on mentally handicapped people. No empathy for victims and their families beyond the most shallow words whatsoever. He targeted former presidents Joe Biden, Barack Obama, and former Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg in his remarks on the deadly DC plane crash, saying Biden's policy was horrible. We must have only the highest standards for those who work in our aviation system. I changed the Obama standards from very mediocre at best to extraordinary, Trump said, without providing evidence or citing specific policy. This didn't happen under Obama, though. He says he changed the standards. Great, you changed the standards before this disaster happened. So what are those new standards? Is it a hiring freeze? Is it pressuring the FAA administrator to resign and seemingly not putting in an interim afterwards? And then when I left office and Biden took over, he changed them back to lower than ever before. I put safety first. Obama, Biden, and the Democrats put policy first, and they put politics at a level that nobody's ever seen because this was the lowest level. Their policy was horrible, and their politics was even worse. This didn't happen under Biden. This didn't happen under Obama. This happened under you. After you came in and made sweeping changes to everything. Blaming a diversity push. When, by the way, in general, there is a traffic air control hole that is not filled in the job market in this country. A lot of positions that aren't filled across the whole country. So there's a lot of initiatives out there trying to encourage people to follow that career path. I remember there was an initiative trying to get gamers and shit to train for it because, you know, you need to, you're operating, you know, mechanics and tools that can function similar to a video game controller. You have to work in high stress situations, right? Like this country's kind of been desperate for more air traffic controllers for a while, and a diversity push is just, you know, one instance of that. Hey, let's not write off people who are missing extremities, who are possibly intellectually disabled in one category or another. Of course they're not doing this and ignoring any potential dangers that could come from this. Of course they're not putting someone who has the mental capacity of a child because they have, you know, a very strong, you know, they are extremely autistic, for example. Of course, they're not putting that person, you know, in the driver's seat here. Okay, that's what Trump's pretending is happening. But we need more air traffic controllers. This diversity push is just part of that. It includes focus on hiring people with intellectual and psychiatric disabilities. The president then turned to Buttigieg saying, do you know how badly everything's run since he's run the Department of Transportation? He wasn't running the Department of Transportation. You and your boy, Sean Duffy, who had only been transportation secretary for like a day, were running it, man. This didn't happen under Buttigieg. And of course, Trump's lackeys, of course, are regurgitating the same BS. Pete Hegseth saying, you know, we can only have the best and brightest, implying that the air traffic controller was not the best and brightest, implying that they were, you know, mentally handicapped with no evidence whatsoever. We want to hire the best people because we want the best people at air traffic control. We want to make sure we have enough people at air traffic control who are actually competent to do the job. Yeah, make sure we have enough people at air traffic control, JD Vance. Yeah, that's a great idea. Maybe, you know, don't trash on a hiring initiative and engage in a hiring freeze that potentially is at cause. If you go back to just some of the headlines over the past 10 years, you have many hundreds of people suing the government because they would like to be air traffic controllers, but they were turned away because of the color of their skin. The vice president continued without providing evidence of the claim. That is so fucking bullshit. That is so bullshit. The FAA has been desperate for more air traffic controllers for years. It's an important position. It's a well-paying position. It's a high stress but otherwise attractive job. But because it's high stress, because it requires special training, and because such a high volume of individuals are needed to maintain safety standards, we haven't been fulfilling those roles. We're desperate. We're desperate for air traffic controllers, dude. We're not turning away hundreds of people who want to be air traffic controllers because they're white. Which, of course, that's what JD Vance means by color of their skin. Of course, that's what he means. He's talking down DEI initiatives. Of course, he's not saying, I think there might be some anti-black, you know, subconscious racism going on behind the scenes. Of course, he's not talking about that. No evidence. Of course, no evidence, because it's not true. We're desperate. All blaming someone else. Trump questions the helicopter movements. You had a pilot problem. Question the movements of the Black Hawk helicopter before it crashed. You had a pilot problem from the standpoint of the helicopter. I mean, because it was visual. It was a very clear night. It was cold but clear, clear as you could be, Trump said. He went on to say the helicopter had the ability to go up or down, had the ability to turn. You could have gone up, you could have gone down, you could have gone straight up, straight down, you could have turned, you could have done a million different maneuvers. I didn't know Donald Trump was licensed and certified to pilot a Black Hawk helicopter around, very busy air traffic. He added that all of this is going to be studied, but it just seems to me, from a couple of words that I like to use, the words common sense. Some really bad things happen and some things happen that shouldn't have happened. God, he's such an idiot. When taking questions later on, Trump seemed to backtrack and say, I'm not blaming the controller. Every single thing he said in his response is implying that the controller is at fault. Saying it's because, of DEI hires. The controller must have been, mentally handicapped. These mistakes are not common. This is the first crash of this type since 2009, okay? It's not common. So, was this just a freak accident of multiple different things lining up just right, causing a catastrophe? And some people are possibly at fault, but at the end of the day, nothing malicious and nothing that could have been done about it. That is possible. We'll need to wait for a complete investigation to conclude before we can say that. A complete investigation that, by all means, we can't necessarily expect to be adequate and up to the same standards as it's historically been because of this fascist dictator. But assuming it is an investigation that is in line with previous standards of NTSB investigation, we'll have to wait about a year, according to NBC reporting, as what is typical. Someone made a mistake on the ground. Did they make a mistake due to managerial malpractice? Did they make a mistake because of one of the many different pressures put upon them by short staffing, by not having an FAA administrator, by all the things that Donald Trump and Elon Musk and Sean Duffy now have done to this industry in a very short period of time? Maybe. Again, we won't know for sure for a while, but maybe. And this is coming out and saying the controller was mentally handicapped, but also I'm not blaming the controller. What an absolute dumbass. Maybe it was the pilot. It just looked like you had options. You don't know how to fly a helicopter? You think you could have done better? You think you could have done different? Okay, let's go back in time. Let's put you in that helicopter. I would have loved to see that. Of course, in the wake of this disaster, now there is an acting FAA commissioner. Kansas senator sidesteps questions on Trump DEI remarks. Senator Jerry Moran, my senator, okay, praised the Trump administration's response to the crash, but sidestepped a question on the president's remarks. Yeah, he was very pleased with the administration's handling of the crash and had spoken to the heads of the defense and transportation departments. Your constituents died, and this that you're praising is blaming freaking the pilot, blaming the controller, blaming mentally handicapped people, blaming DEI, blaming Pete Buttigieg and Obama and Biden. Your constituents are dead, and many more are grieving. And this guy, by the way, he's my senator, okay? So there's reason why I know this. This guy has made a career out of towing the line between the moderate portion of the Republican Party and, of course, the MAGA side, right? He doesn't want to come across as a never-Trumper. Of course not. That's not a good political position to have as a Republican nowadays. But he's also not one to go out of his way and say ridiculous things in accordance with, the Trump rhetoric, right? This guy pretends to be a moderate Republican. Those don't exist, but he pretends to be one. Praising the Trump administration's response, blaming DEI for the death of his own constituents. You, Jerry Moran. As a constituent of yours, you. Almost certainly it's a combination of factors like this. Unusually high traffic that, has only been occurring like this for, 7-8 months? Not necessarily regular. Only one controller on duty at the time, a number of other small issues all compiling together. Of course, we will not know for sure for a while. NTSB saying they're going to investigate all humans involved. Naturally. Of course you're going to investigate every human involved. Trump incompetence might have caused crash once people with great brain. He told reporters in the Oval Office this afternoon that incompetence might have caused the crash. Asked if race or gender played a role in the collision given his comments on DEI in the morning, Trump said, "It may have, I don't know." Can we not see this for what it is, man? I swear to God. People are dead. Race and gender might have played a role. You know, it might have been a black person, might have been a woman, it might have been a black woman who was, you know, operating traffic control that time, and that's why the crash happened. Can we not see this for what it is? Republicans love to cry wolf whenever a disaster happens and people die, and people on the left or liberals or anyone whatsoever wants to talk about solutions, right? Whenever there's a mass shooting and people start talking about potential solutions to avoid future mass shootings, Republicans, conservatives love to, you know, cry wolf, love to go, why are you politicizing such an awful tragedy? People are dead. Kids are dead. Why are you taking this opportunity to play politics? It's gross. It's disgusting. Meanwhile, 67 people are dead, and our president of the United States of America is saying it might have been because a black person was involved. Asked this morning how he came to the conclusion that diversity played a role in the crash, Trump said, "Because I have common sense, okay?" Jump into my conclusion spiel right now because I think I'm allowed it given, you know, my unique proximity to this as a Wichitan. If you are under any impression whatsoever, regardless of your political identity, that Donald Trump, and not just Donald Trump, but all the leaders that he surrounds himself with, those who have very recently been put into power, have the well-being of the American public as a priority, then you are a fool or you're lying. We will get to other stories today, over the coming days, over his entire Trump presidency, that exemplify just how evil this guy is and exposing exactly what his presidency is all about. But what we know right now is that 64 people departed from my home city last night to Washington, D.C., and they died in a plane crash. Shortly after, this new president and his new administration utilized their virtually limitless power in a short period of time to enact sweeping changes across the transportation industry, including, of course, aviation. And now, as the bodies are still being recovered, bodies of my neighbors, he is blaming DEI, advertising that it was potentially the fault of the mentally handicapped, of a potentially black person, of a potential woman. Race and gender, he said, may have played a part. He is blaming Obama, who is not in power, Biden, who is not in power, Pete Buttigieg, who is not in power, and providing absolutely zero evidence whatsoever to suggest it was a person's status as a minority who was only hired to their position because of their minority status as the target of blame. Donald Trump and those in power he surrounds himself with are very likely to blame for the deaths of my neighbors last night, and they are playing the blame game. And I am too damn tired to raise my voice more than it is right now to engage in another long, angry spiel. And I am too damn tired of the overt fascism. But this is affecting me, okay? This was my backyard this time. Next time it'll be someone else's. One time it'll be yours. We all have something to lose, and we're gonna lose it. And there will be no remorse, no time for introspection, as we have seen by their response that virtually all Republicans are rallying around, including my allegedly moderate senator, whose constituents are dead in the Potomac River, are looking to double down. Their body count has officially started, and it is nowhere near being done. Hi, editing Casey here. Ignore the awful lighting. So literally, as I was editing this video, another plane crash occurred, this time in Philadelphia, seemingly on a much smaller scale, But still, another plane crash shortly after this one. This is hopefully a very poorly timed coincidence and not a sign that this is now more regular, given everything I just talked about in the video. But yeah, it's very eerie that this happened like this just now, literally while I was editing a video about the Wichita DC crash. So stay safe, stay informed. They're tearing these systems down brick by brick, and we're the ones that have to pay the price.